Alright guys, so today we're going to be talking about Game Pass's newest game, Deliver Us the Moon. And a lot of you probably don't know what this is, never heard of it. I know I had never heard of it. I just like space games and saw it, so I downloaded it, and it's pretty great, right? So this is kind of, I guess you could call it a puzzle adventure story game. I don't really know how to classify this. It's definitely story heavy with puzzles in there, and the gameplay consists of some puzzles, like I said, platforming, walking around and figuring out codes for doors, that kind of stuff, right? So there's no fighting or flying or any of that stuff. By the way, this is the best part of the game right here. So, at least to me, this is my favorite part. This is at the beginning of the game. You get to prime up the spaceship before you fly off. And the game's kind of broken up into 3 sections, right? So they have this first section where you have to get to space and kind of establish your presence there. And then the next section, you're lining up these satellites. And then the final section, I won't spoil that. But there's a lot of repetition in this game, I guess you could say. There's a lot of, this area doesn't have power, get it power, and it's not that there's no action in the game. It's just that what there is, you're not doing the fighting, right? So, let me just show you guys some more of the gameplay aspects you can kind of understand. So this counter on your back, right? That is the main mechanic that they use in this game, right? It's your oxygen levels, if that wasn't obvious. And they'll make you, go into certain rooms without oxygen, or do these puzzles that have interferences that'll slow you down, or, make you go out on the moon, on the surface. And so that's kind of their main gameplay mechanic. They revolve pretty much everything around. It's used just enough to where it's not overused, but it can get annoying at times. It's not every puzzle, but it's a large majority of the puzzles. But let's talk more about kind of the story of the game than the gameplay, because that's the main focus, right? The gameplay, I think, is just there to give the player something to do. The story is more of the main focus. So, the Earth ran out of resources, and they went to the moon, found more resources, and then 5 years later, or some time passes, right? And then the moon bridge, whatever you want to call it, it collapses, and you don't know why. And so your job is to go up there, figure out why it collapsed, and restart it before everybody on Earth dies from not having resources. Now, this isn't exactly a new idea, but the way it's shown is interesting, right? So what they do is they have these holograms placed throughout the space stations, along with audio recordings, which you've seen in other games, and something that's really nice, that's just a small detail, is these audio recordings you can listen to without being in the menu. I know a lot of games make you open the menu and you listen to the audio recordings. You have to just sit there in the menu and listen to them and stare at nothingness. But I know Metal Gear Solid does, and that's one example, and this game also does it, and just lets you continue to play while the audio recordings are playing. So that's just a nice little feature they have in there. But that's kind of how you get the story, right, is these holograms. And the only problem I have with the story is it starts out really slow, and then it picks up. So this game is, people say about 5 to 6 hours. It felt longer than that to me, but I would probably ballpark it around 6 hours, depending on how much collecting you do. And so it's not too long, but the story doesn't really pick up until probably the 4 or 5 hour mark, right? And it gets interesting when it picks up. It just takes a while. It kind of lingers around the idea of we don't know what happened, and it just sits there. It doesn't really give you any clues until the very end, and then it just really picks up. Now, I won't spoil anything at the end, but for some of you that say, oh, this game, not a lot of gameplay, you're right. The gameplay aspects aren't anything new and interesting and amazing. There's better space simulators out there, but this game is story heavy, right? And it's gonna lack in the beginning, but towards the end it's gonna pick up, and I personally like the ending. But I can understand why there would be people who don't like the ending, but I like it. It's also one of those games where your main character doesn't talk, so if that, really bothers you, then that's a whole thing. But I think they're trying to simulate, the whole space thing and how you're on your own and no one's there with you, and that's why the character doesn't talk. But that might just be me looking too much into it. But there is some performance things with this game I want to talk about. So, on the Xbox One X, there's, in the settings menu, an option to play this in 4K at 30 frames and 1080 at 60 frames, right? And I've played plenty of 30 frame games, right? That's what I mainly played when I first started playing games, and I don't have a problem with them. I can go back and play them now, but for some reason, this game in 30 frames per second is absolutely impossible to look at. I don't know what the problem is, but I wasn't going to play anymore. I was going to uninstall the game and stop at the beginning. Thank God I found the setting. Now, obviously, I don't have gameplay of that 30 frame per second mode because, like I said, it doesn't look great. Now, the game, it has its moments. It looks good in some spots, and it doesn't look as good in others. But I don't think that 4K, is really going to add enough to where the frame rate should be dropped that much, right? I would just highly recommend playing this in 1080 at 60 frames. It's just, it's up to you. It's your choice, but... So, that's pretty much all I wanted to say for this game. It's another short video, but if you got nothing to do, if you're in quarantine and you want to play a little space game for a day that will give you a story and has really good music, then go download this off of Game Pass, play it in one sitting, and see you guys on the next one.